Now, children, we move to the last and the most important bit of that story, where the story ends on a note of magic, mystery, suspense. And once again, you would pause this video and read the remaining part of the story, page number 21, 22, and 23. And then you will resume listening to this audio. I think you have finished reading the story. Now I would explain the last part of the story. Now, obviously, Shankar was very upset and also worried about his friend's mental state. So while Shankar was having a bath, suddenly a thought came to his mind, an idea came to his mind. And he thought of putting that idea into practice because he thought that probably this idea was the only way in which he could restore Jayanto to normalcy or bring Jayanto back to normalcy or to a normal state. And what plan did he have in mind? He says, you have already read this in the book. He says, if a doll had been buried somewhere 30 years ago, and if one knew the exact spot, it might be possible to dig the ground there. No doubt, most of it would have been destroyed. But it was likely that we'd find just a few things, especially if they were made of metal, such as the buckle of the belt or the brass buttons on a jacket. If Jayanto could actually be shown that this was all that was left of his precious doll, he might be able to rid himself of his weird notions. Otherwise, he would have strange dreams every night and talk of Fritz walking on his chest. And if this kind of thing was allowed to continue, he might go totally mad. Therefore, he planned to, locate that place where Fritz was buried and dig up the ground there. And after, 31 years, 31 years, obviously the doll would have been absolutely decomposed. Most of it would be destroyed. But he thought that something of it might still be there. Maybe some metal button or brass buckle or some button, some from the jacket. Something might be there. If you could find even one or two little bit from those that doll, then probably he could show it to Jayanto and tell him, this is what remains of your doll. So obviously it was buried here and it is destroyed over, so it cannot come back to life. It could not have walked over him. So probably that will make Jayanto realize that he was having a very stupid, absurd thought in his mind. And he wanted that this idea should be put to rest, because if he did not do anything about it, then probably Jayanto would not be able to rid himself of this notion of Fritz being alive and walking over his chest. Every night he would dream of a similar thing and he would keep talking about Fritz. And doing this again and again might drive a normal person like Jayanto also to madness. So he wanted to put an end to this entire thought by proving to Jayanto that the doll was now destroyed, it was now decomposed, no bit of it remained. Initially, Jayanto liked the idea of Shankar, but later on he was hesitant and he asked where will they, who will do that digging for them, where will they find a spade. Now Shankar said that, if they have a garden here, there has to be a gardener, and if there is a gardener, there has to be a spade. So if they offer a little tip to this gardener, then obviously that gardener should not have any objection in digging up a little place under the trunk of the tree, because he'll be paid money for it. Now Jayanto did not accept this idea immediately, and later on Jayanto went for a bath, And at lunch, Jayanto did not eat much. And Shankar found this unusual because he knew that Jayanto was very fond of his food and he ate a hearty meal. After lunch, they went to the garden and they sat there. And in a little while, the gardener approached, and he was an old man. Now, Shankar went up to him to talk to him, and he asked him if the gardener could dig up a little bit of ground for him, and he even offered a good amount of money for it. He offered 5 rupees for digging up the ground, and this was quite a good sum in those days. The gardener very happily agreed to do this, and then the gardener fetched a spade, and they all moved towards the Deodar tree that Jayanto had mentioned earlier. And after they reached there, Jayanto identified the place where he thought or where he knew he had buried the doll. Now Shankar asked him how deep had he dug before he had buried the doll. So he said he had dug up around 8 inches of soil before burying the doll. After that, the gardener started digging the ground, and there was no smile on the face of Jayanto. And it was the month of October, and October is not a cold month in. October is not at all warm in Bundi. And despite that, the collar of Jayanto's shirt was all soaked in sweat. That is how terrified or how anxious he was, that despite it not being hot at all, the entire shirt collar was soaked in sweat. And Jayanto just stood there staring unblinkingly at the ground. Now, after that, there was a deep voice of the peacock crying, and this made Shankar turn his head for a while. And in that very instance, Jayanto made a very strange sound. And when Shankar quickly looked at him, Jayanto's eyes were bulging, and Jayanto had raised his right hand, and he was pointing it at the hole in the ground, and his fingers were trembling. And then, in a trembling voice, which was hoarse with fear, Jayanto asked, What was that? Now that was Jayanto's reaction. Gardener's reaction was that the spade slipped from Gardener's hand. And Shankar's reaction was that Shankar also gaped at the ground open-mouthed in horror, amazement and disbelief. Now this was a reaction of all three of them. Now for Jayanto, I repeat, it was his eyes were bulging. He raised his right hand and pointed at the ground, and his finger was visibly trembling. And in a hoarse voice with fear, he asked, What was that? The reaction for the gardener was the spade slipped from his hands. And the reaction for Shankar was that he gaped. Gaped is like gaping like a pig, open mouth. He gaped at the ground, open mouthed, in horror, in amazement, and in disbelief. And why was this the reaction of Jayanto and of Shankar and the gardener? Because there lay at their feet, covered in dust, lying flat on its back, a 12-inch long, pure white, perfect little human skeleton. Now little human skeleton, and that too 12-inch long. Now that was precisely the height of Fritz. Fritz was a 12-inch tall. and that backbone that was there, the spine, Jayanto had always addressed it as a living creature. Now, commenting on the ending of the story, we will discuss that in the next audio. We will comment on the element of supernatural, magic, mystery, the ambiguous ending of the story. We will discuss all of that in the next audio.